I thought my 25th birthday would be the day I finally felt seen by my family. Instead, it became the night I realized I was completely invisible. It wasn't just the insults from a stranger that broke me. It was the way my own father smiled while it happened. The rain was drumming against the window panes of our family home, a rhythmic, soothing sound that usually made me feel safe. But inside, the air felt tight. I smoothed down the fabric of my dress, checking my reflection one last time. For the first time in years, I felt confident. I had spent months working on myself, finding my peace, and building a life I was proud of. "Lily Rose, are you coming down or waiting for a royal invitation?" My sister Sarah's voice sliced through my thoughts. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs. The living room was glowing with warm lights, filled with the scent of roasted garlic and expensive wine. This was supposed to be my night. Then I saw him. Standing next to Sarah was a man I hadn't met yet. He was tall, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, and he carried an aura of effortless arrogance. "Lily, finally," Sarah said, barely looking at me. "This is Mark. Mark, this is my sister, the quiet one." Mark didn't offer a hand. He just looked me up and down, a slow, judgmental scan that made my skin crawl. "So this is the famous Lily," he said, his voice laced with a strange, immediate hostility. "Sarah told me you were into finding yourself. I didn't realize that meant hiding in your room all day." A few cousins nearby chuckled. I felt a flush creep up my neck, but I forced a smile. "I value my privacy, Mark. Nice to meet you." Dinner was served shortly after. I sat at the end of the long mahogany table, flanked by relatives I hadn't seen in months. My father sat at the head, looking proud as he listened to Mark talk about his latest venture capital gains. Mark was a performer. He held the room's attention with practiced ease. "You know," Mark said, leaning back and swirling his wine, "I've always believed that you can tell everything about a person's drive by their presence. Some people just take up space without contributing much." The table went silent. "Take Lily here," he continued, a smirk playing on his lips. "She's the birthday girl, yet she's contributed the least to the conversation. It's almost like she's a ghost in her own house. Is that the plan, Lily? To just drift through life on your parents' dime while the rest of us actually build something?" The silence stretched, agonizingly long. I waited for my father to say something. I waited for him to defend me, to tell Mark he was being disrespectful. Instead, my father let out a short, dry laugh. "Well, Mark, she's always been the dreamer. We've stopped expecting much else." Laughter erupted around the table. It wasn't loud or mean-spirited from everyone, but it was there, a collective agreement that I was the family joke. "I'm not a ghost, Mark," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I work hard. I have my own career, my own goals. Just because I don't brag about them doesn't mean they don't exist." Mark rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go. The sensitive soul is offended. Don't be so dramatic, Lily. It's a joke. Learn to take a hit if you want to play with the big dogs." I looked at my father. "Dad, please. He's being incredibly rude." My father didn't even look up from his steak. "Lily, stop making things up. Don't ruin the mood with your insecurities. Mark is a guest, and he's just having some fun. Stop being so thin-skinned and enjoy your birthday." The humiliation felt like cold water down my spine. I looked around the table. Sarah was busy on her phone. My mother was staring at her plate, and Mark was looking at me with pure triumph in his eyes. He knew he could get away with it. He knew my own family wouldn't stand up for me. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. "I think I've had enough fun for one night," I whispered. That's what they expected. The fragile, sensitive Lily Rose retreated into her shell. Instead, I grabbed my coat and walked out into the rain. I needed air that wasn't thick with the smell of Mark's expensive cologne and my family's indifference. I sat in my car, the wipers rhythmically clearing the windshield, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I realized then that as long as I stayed in that house, I would always be the punchline. About an hour later, the front door opened. I ducked down instinctively. It was Mark. He was on his phone, stepping under the porch light to light a cigarette. He looked different when he wasn't performing for an audience. The charm was gone, replaced by a sharp, anxious energy. Look, I told you, the wire will go through by Monday. He snapped into the phone. His voice was low, but the rain had settled into a drizzle, and his words carried in the quiet night. The old man is eating out of my hand. He thinks I'm a genius. Once the wedding is set, the investment from his side is guaranteed. Just keep the creditors off my back for 3 more days. He went silent, listening to the person on the other end. I don't care about the sister, Mark hissed, flicking ash into my mother's rose bushes. She's a nobody, a ghost. I leaned on her tonight just to show the dad I'm the alpha in the room, and he loved it. He practically joined in. She's not going to get in the way of this money. I'll have her moved out of that house before the ink is dry on the marriage license. My heart hammered against my ribs. Mark wasn't just a jerk. He was a predator. He was scouting my family like a vulture, and my father, the man who taught me to value logic and facts, was blinded by the glitz of Mark's fake success. Mark finished his cigarette, crushed it under his shoe, and headed back inside, whistling a low tune. I sat there for a long time. I could go inside right now and scream the truth. I could tell my father that his favorite success story was actually a fraud on the brink of bankruptcy. But I knew exactly what would happen. Dad would tell me I was making things up again. Sarah would call me jealous. Mark would twist it into me being obsessed with him. If I wanted to save my family, or more importantly, save myself, I couldn't just speak. I needed proof. I walked back into the house through the kitchen door. The party had moved to the parlor. I could hear the clink of glasses and Mark's booming laughter. I slipped upstairs, but I didn't go to my ring. I went to the guest coat closet in the hallway. Mark's leather briefcase was sitting right there on the bench. My pulse was electric. This was the man who called me a ghost. Well, it was time for the ghost to start haunting him. I reached for the latch, my breath catching in my throat as I heard footsteps approaching the hallway. The footsteps grew louder. I ducked behind the heavy velvet curtains of the hallway window, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it. It was Sarah. She paused by the mirror, adjusted her lipstick, and hummed a tune before heading back to the party. The coast was clear. I knelt by the briefcase. My fingers fumbled with the clasp, and with a soft click, it gave way. I didn't have much time. I began leafing through the folders, bank statements, legal notices, and several passports. My blood turned to ice. One passport had his photo, but the name wasn't Mark. It was Marcus Thorne. Beneath the passports was a stack of legal documents, final notices of foreclosure, and a notice of intent to sue for a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme in another state. He wasn't a venture capitalist. He was a professional con artist. He was using Sarah to get to my father's retirement fund, and he was using me as a punching bag to build trust with the men of the house. Suddenly, the light in the hallway flickered. Looking for something, Lily Rose? I froze. I didn't even have to look up to know it was Mark. I looked up and saw him leaning against the doorframe, the shadow from the hallway making his eyes look like dark hollows. The charming mask was completely gone now. "You're a fraud," I whispered, holding up the second passport. "You're Marcus Thorne. You're broke, and you're running from the law." Mark didn't flinch. He walked into the room and closed the door softly behind him. He took a slow step toward me, a cold, predatory smile stretching across his face. "And who are you going to tell, Lily? Your sister, who is already planning our honeymoon? Or your father, who literally told you to shut up an hour ago because he likes me more than he likes you?" He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "You're the girl who makes things up, remember? If you show those papers to your dad, I'll just tell him you stole them from a disgruntled business rival of mine to spite me. I'll tell him we're mentally unstable. And based on tonight's performance, who do you think he's going to believe?" He snatched the passport out of my hand and shoved it back into the bag. "Go back to your room, little ghost. Stay out of the way of the grown-ups, and maybe I'll let you keep a corner of this house when I own it." He stepped back, smoothed his suit, and walked out, leaving me trembling on the floor. He was right. My father's pride was his greatest weakness. He wouldn't want to admit he'd been conned by a man he'd just praised in front of the whole family. If I went in there now, I would lose. He thought I was just a dreamer. He forgot that dreamers are the ones who know how to build worlds from nothing. And I knew exactly how to make sure the whole world saw the real Marcus Thorne, starting with the people in the other room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It had been recording the entire conversation from the moment I opened the briefcase. I stood in the shadows of the hallway for a moment, clutching my phone. My heart was no longer racing with fear, it was pulsing with a cold, sharp clarity. Mark thought I was a ghost, someone who didn't exist in the real world of power and money. He was about to find out that ghosts are the ones who see everything. I walked back into the parlor. The party was reaching its peak. My father stood near the fireplace, a crystal glass of bourbon in his hand, looking every bit the proud patriarch. "But attention, everyone," my father called out, clinking his glass. "I want to propose a final toast, not just to Lily's birthday, but to the future of this family. Having Mark join us has opened my eyes to new possibilities. Mark, thank you for your insight tonight." Mark stood beside Sarah, looking humble and triumphant. He caught my eye and gave a microscopic, mocking nod. "Wait, Dad," I said, stepping into the center of the room. My voice was calm, which seemed to surprise everyone. "Before you finish, I have a gift. Not for me, but for the family. Since I'm the dreamer who makes things up, I thought I'd share a story that's actually very real." "Lily, not now," Sarah hissed, her face turning red. "It's okay, Sarah," Mark said smoothly, putting an arm around her. "Let her have her moment. We know how she gets." I didn't argue. I simply walked over to the Bluetooth speaker sitting on the sideboard, the one we have been using for background music all night. With a quick tap on my phone, the connection chimed. I hit play. The old man is eating out of my hand. Once the wedding is set, the investment from his side is guaranteed. I'll have her moved out of that house before the ink is dry. The room went deathly silent. Mark's face didn't just turn pale, it turned a sickly shade of gray. My father's hand froze midair, his glass trembling. Then came the second part of the recording, the confrontation in the hallway. "And who are you going to tell, Lily? Your father, who literally told you to shut up an hour ago because he likes me more than he likes you?" When the recording ended, the only sound was the rain hitting the roof. I looked at my father. For the first time in my life, he looked small. He looked at Mark, then at the floor, then finally at me. The realization that he had sided with a predator against his own daughter was written in every line of his face. "Mark?" My father's voice was a low growl, or should I say, Marcus Thorne. Mark tried to pivot. "Sir, that's an AI deepfake. She's trying to frame me because she's jealous." "Get out," my father whispered. "Dad, listen," Sarah started, but my father roared. I said, "Get out." Mark didn't wait. He grabbed his briefcase and bolted for the door, the mask of the billionaire investor completely shattered. Sarah followed him, crying, though whether she was crying for him or out of embarrassment, I didn't know. The guests began to filter out awkwardly, leaving me and my father alone in the wreckage of the party. He walked over to me, his shoulders slumped. "Lily," he started, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I told you to stop making things up, and you were the only one telling the truth." I looked at him, and for a second, I wanted to hug him. But the memory of everyone laughing at the table was still too fresh. "You didn't just fail to listen, Dad," I said softly. "You chose a stranger over your daughter because he spoke the language of greed better than I spoke the language of love. I'm not making things up anymore. I'm making a life. And for now, I think I need to make it somewhere else." I walked out of that house not as a ghost, but as the only person who is truly awake. Would you ever forgive a parent who chose a stranger's lies over your truth? If you enjoyed this story of standing your ground, hit the subscribe button for more Lily Calm Stories. Your peace is worth protecting.